Hey y'all, welcome to the T-Work podcast, hosted by Grant Banko and me, Adam Moreau. From entrepreneurs and athletes to the rat racers of corporate America and those who refuse to be put in a box, we want to share their stories and understand how they ended up where they are. Success and development come in many shapes and sizes. We want to hear about it all. So grab a drink and pull up a seat. Let's spill some tea and get to
Welcome back to the T-Work podcast. Today we have Randall Thompson, co-founder of Dugout Mugs. We first came in contact with Randall actually back in college, I think in 2014-ish. He was actually one of our coaches for a very short stint, and that was actually kind of where the idea started of Dugout Mugs. And so we sort of saw the whole company go from the ground up. I'm going to pass it over to Randall to sort of just go into Dugout Mugs, his background and everything. So Randall, thanks for joining us.
Yep. Yeah, happy to be here and happy to see you guys. It has been a long journey from 2014, almost 10 years, which don't sleep on how quickly 10 years can pass, because I'm sure you guys have blinked and here we are. But yeah, Dugout Mugs, barrel of a baseball bat turned into a drinking mug. I had the idea in 2014 when I was in a Florida Tech dugout, and then I ended up meeting somebody that you guys knew that was at Eckerd, AJ. We started converting barrels of baseball bats into drinking mugs, initially launched as Lumberland. Him and I couldn't get along. I went off, I did my own thing, started Dugout Mugs. He kept running Lumberland. He sued me, didn't win the lawsuit. It was frivolous as hell. And then yeah, ended up buying Lumberland like 8 years later, and here we are. Took a little jab at AJ there for frivolously suing me, but you know,
That's about as high level as we could get to start. We just told
yeah,
a 10-year, you told a 10-year story in what, 45
10,
seconds? That's pretty
10
solid.
seconds. Yeah,
All right, so does that conclude the podcast? We're good. We
yeah,
we feel good about everything.
yeah. Let's wrap it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, before we get into like Dugout Mugs and stuff, I mean, I guess give background, Randall, on like baseball in your life and how far along you went and your playing career and everything like that. I think that gives good perspective for people as well.
For sure. Grew up in Orlando, Florida. Played little league baseball. Played high school baseball. From high school, I was a 3-year junior varsity player. Um, Senior year, played varsity baseball. Had no scholarship offers. Had a D2 walk-on spot at Florida Tech, who you guys played against in the Sunshine State Conference, and went there. Played 4 years. After my 4th year, I signed with the Toronto Blue Jays. After signing with the Toronto Blue Jays, I was there for about a season and a half. Got released and extended spring training of 2012. And then from 2012 to 2013-ish, about a year, I kind of just worked at a paint store. From there, I wanted to get back into coaching, started coaching at Florida Tech. Left that, went over to St. Pete and started coaching at Eckerd, and that's where we met. Yeah,
And you gave
so
us a loving semester of your life before you went back to Florida Tech again. Is that right? If I'm
where
not
did I
mistaken.
where did I go? No, I was still in St. Pete. But the idea was I was in St. Pete, and the idea is that I took a job. I was driving a paint delivery van from 7 a.m. to about 3 p.m. And then instead of coaching, I wanted to try to take this concept that I had of taking a barrel of a baseball bat and turning it into a drinking mug. So I spent the afternoons and the nights trying to pursue that, and then I spent the mornings driving a delivery van. And so that's why I left coaching at Eckerd.
So it was a
Well,
good question because I don't remember. I didn't remember why he left either. I thought he went back to Florida Tech as well. So that was a good question.
I couldn't remember. I remember at some point looking across the dugout and we had to change every single one of our signs for some reason because I'm sure Randall cared a ton about what we were doing
Somebody
base
told me
stealing
that.
wise.
Yeah, somebody told me that. I can't remember who that was. Um, Golly, I can't remember. I was somewhere and someone said that you guys were playing Florida Tech and maybe just get in boat race, and the conclusion that you came to was that that I gave Florida Tech the signs, and so that's how they knew, you know, But no,
That's
I
the
mean,
world we lived in for about a year, that there was some sort of insider trading or whatever of the baseball world, that everything we were doing internally was getting leaked while we spent 10 minutes a day doing jumping jacks.
well, yeah, I mean, I would tell you 10 years later if I did that. I, I don't think I have those bones in my body, but no, I didn't. And to be honest with you, I probably wouldn't even known what the signs were. So,
That's what I figured.
yeah, I didn't do that. Someone
Yeah,
took a
well, speaking of baseball in 2014, I do want to share a quick anecdote. I think it might be my single greatest memory I have of you, which was we had a Saturday morning practice get called at like 8 a.m. and there was a small crop of us that were like actually there and on time. It was also communicated later in the fact that the 8 a.m. practice then got moved to 9 a.m. for some reason after we all got there at like 7:30 for the 8 a.m. practice. And if you guys remember, we had no personal access to our own locker room. We could only be let in by our head coach or campus security. So Randall spent 30 straight minutes trying to pick our lock so we could get into our own locker room. So by the time our head coach and the other assistant showed up, Randall completely sweat through everything he had owned trying to pick our lock for Renero to show up with the key, just turn it, twist it, and walk in.
There's probably a life story in that somewhere, isn't there?
There has to be, but
Yeah.
all I know is that might be my single most vivid baseball memory of you.
Hmm. I don't even remember that.
I
It's
didn't remember that until you got to the picking the lock part, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I do remember that now."
Yeah, I mean that one stuck with me. So thanks for all the baseball lessons in the process, Randall.
yeah, isn't that usually how you guys are far enough away from it now to know that it's not even about baseball, that you eventually uh, all the time that you thought you were just playing baseball, that's not actually what you're doing. All the memories don't even come back to the games, or it's everything else that's in between the games. So
It's the connections, it's the ideas, it's the conversations in the dugout, which I'm trying to bring us back a little bit here if that wasn't super evident, of how ideas get started and you eventually create a product out of thin air. So if you want to take us through a little bit of that idea, how you got to this point, where it stemmed from, were you always creative? I don't know where you want to jump off from, but I'd love if we could go down this road for a little bit.
hmm yeah, definitely always creative, definitely always thinking of different concepts. And when I was coaching at Florida Tech, uh, the hitting coach was taking baseball bats, wooden baseball bats, cutting them in half, creating training tools, a bunch of loose bat barrels lying around in the dugout. And I just had a light bulb moment. Obviously, you guys know there's a natural cupping to the bat that if you kept going with that cupping, could you turn that into some sort of mug that you would drink from? And I initially had the idea or the concept that I would convert broken bats into drinking mugs. As you guys know, the bat industry, you pay a couple $100 for a really nice wooden bat, and the first swing that you take, you break. At least getting some utility out of it afterwards would kind of help your sunk cost a little bit. But yeah, so that's where the initial concept came from. Was in the Florida Tech dugout, and and getting a prototype and taking it to market and then selling a ton of units. There's obviously more to it than that, but that's where the concept came from.
I guess going from that, what was the time duration from like that light bulb moment to the prototype and then the prototype to actually like production in the first sale?
Well, see, the that's the interesting part, is that when you first start, you don't know what questions to ask yourself, and it usually takes a lot longer to get from point A to point B when you're first starting off. So when I first started, I didn't know what a wood lathe was. I didn't know that I just needed a wood turner in order to make this dream into a reality. Um, So it took quite a long time to get the very first one made. And then once the very first one was made, it kind of started rolling from there. But actual time frame from idea to first one made, probably about a year. From the first one made to the first one sold, probably another 6 months. So probably looking at 18 months to get it to a certain level.
All right. So building off of that 18 months, I think it's a good perspective of like patience and people thinking things come to fruition way faster and they give up way too soon. What helped you during that initial process of just like, I mean, you were working from 7 to 3, you said, delivering paint. So and then in the afternoons working. That's got to be a long, tenuous 18 months of just grinding it out. So what helped you in that period?
Well, yeah, that's the um well, I always say that if somebody wants to start a business or if they want to be in business, they got to really love it. Because if you don't love it, you're not going to want to do it. And Adam, you know that it's just it kind of sucks, you know. And I heard this quote that like some people have to be uh, they they have to be who they can be, and I think that sometimes just something gets a hold of you and you're just not satisfied with where you're at, and the only thing that would bring you the satisfaction is kind of just going after the big or going after your own version of success. um, so I don't know. I mean, those 18 months, um, yeah, it's just kind of being unhappy with where you're at, and being so unhappy with where you're at, you're willing to just continue to just give it hell. But then I think to myself, there's some people that spend 4 years of their life trying to make something work that's never going to work. And so, what's the difference between me and those 18 months of pursuing this and getting it to work, and then actually finding success with it, and then people that are spending 2 years of their life trying to create something that never has success? So uh, I don't know if I answered your question, but it kind of
There's a real thin
just
line between success and insanity, I would say. I mean, we've heard it
yeah, I
time and
agree with
time
that.
again. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I'm sure some of it for you is you were seeing slight improvements, the slightest bit of
Yeah,
iteration
that's fair.
that gave you the glimmer of success or the glimmer of hope. So each day of those 18 months probably felt like forever, but every day or every month was a new opportunity when you finally figured out how to use the lathe or the laser engraving or something else that made your process easier, just moved you along closer to the original vision that you had.
Yeah, that's well said, and I think that's a fair assumption. As long as you're seeing some sort of progress or some towards the life that you want, then maybe that's the inspiration that you need to kind of wake up and do the next day. I also think that a lot of a lot of life is just deciding to have a certain mindset. When I was delivering that paint and then just working like crazy, like in the early years, I was doing both. I was bringing Dugout Mugs to life, and I was working in a paint store, and I was working really long days. I mean, sometimes I would wake up in the morning and I would be putting on, uh, like a Sherwin-Williams shirt and tucking the shirt into my pants. And I would just say, imagine how great life is going to be when I actually get to do what I do every day. And I could be like, man, this sucks. But you can just decide, make a decision of what mindset you want to have, and just have that mindset every day until you get to where you want to be.
Yeah, no, that's a good perspective to have, and I'll say one other piece probably to it that neither of you will probably say, but you'll agree with is some of it's luck. I mean, it's very much like there's a lot of work that comes in, but sometimes it is just pure luck in small bits and pieces that help it go from that non-successful to successful business. I think there's a little bit of luck in everyone's lives in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I like Dave Meltzer says the just stay in business. And the longer you stay in business, the more luck you're going to have.
Hmm.
And so I agree with you, Banko. I think there is. I agree with you, and I don't agree with you. You know, I think the harder you work, the luckier you get. But I also think that there's just sometimes there's just unexplainable, serendipitous style of things that happen in your life, um, and it brings you success. And yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. Luck definitely helps.
Yeah, from what Banko said, there's a part of me that really wants to talk some shit to him because I feel like everything that we have done is from the work that we have put in. But then, yeah, I can step back and say, if we didn't get an introduction from somebody that didn't have to give us an introduction, we might not have the opportunities that we have currently. Or if we weren't asked to speak at some event that then people in the audience ended up making a purchase, we might not be where we're at. Something like that, where I guess that's out of our control, so you can label it as luck. But then there's the other side of me that said we work so hard to create that good opinion of ourselves or put our name out there. So if it wasn't for us, that person never would have been able to make that connection or they never would have invited us to speak. So I can constantly have that ebb and
Yep.
flow in my mind or the back and forth where I want to go from talking shit to just admitting like, no, you're right. Like I need others to come through for me, and that's out of my control.
Yeah. Yeah, I think early in business, I didn't believe in luck at all. Um, I was kind of like in the like I'll create my own luck. Um, but I guess when 10 years of being in business and then actually slowing down long enough to reflect on things, um, I think there's some luck that's baked into it every once in a while. But I agree with your points, Adam. I think I don't know. Who knows? You can. Here's what I've learned about myself. I'll think one thing on this side, and I'll think one thing on this side, and then I'll think one thing on this side and one thing on this side, and I'll just stay in the middle the whole time. Sometimes you just gotta be like, "Fuck it, there's no luck," you know,
I
and just,
mean,
and
yeah,
just die on
that's
that
fair.
horse.
Right.
I mean, that's
Um,
Adam's. That's definitely where Adam's dying on. He won't
Oh,
say it, and he doesn't want to get into it. But I guess I'll rephrase it in the sense of I was building off of the mindset thing, and I saw a recent thing of like, if you believe you're lucky, the luckier you will be because your mindset is that you'll believe that. So you'll see opportunities in that sense. And like a personal example for myself, I wouldn't say I was thinking I was lucky, but when I switched jobs recently, I was applying to a job a day on LinkedIn for like 3 months. So that's 90 different jobs. And then I was only looking on LinkedIn. But during that process, I was like, oh, wait, let me think of companies in this area that I want to live in. And then I went to their website. They weren't posting jobs on LinkedIn. They were just posting on the website. I found a job on their website, applied to it, and that's the job I actually got. So it's like there's a little bit of luck of like, oh, I thought to go to their website, but it was also because of 90 other jobs that I applied for. So like that's more what I meant. Like it's kind of a mindset thing too.
Adam, you got anything on that?
I don't know. Banko's just gonna pigeonhole me and say that you yeah, to me, just put in the work, man. Like I know if we're turning this more from a podcast for a listener to us discussing, I'm gonna switch that and be like, well, that's on you. Like if you want a job, you should probably exhaust all opportunities to try to get that job. If you're only looking in one lane, you know you're limiting your opportunity that could be approaching you. So that's my take on that. That's probably not a massive takeaway for a listener or anything, and that's definitely doesn't sport anything in this interview with Randall. But that's just me talking to you. Congrats on the
Fair,
job, of course. I mean, I'm happy you found
fair enough.
it.
I think it would be cool if for the next 40 minutes I didn't say anything and you guys just argued about this, just debated it.
That's our
we can
standard existence, to be
yeah,
fair.
we can do a separate episode for that.
Bring people we should. That's a good idea, Randall. And then we'll take this one from you for sure. We'll just see how many consecutive episodes we can bring someone on and never hear from them besides their initial intro.
Yeah, that'd be a great concept for a podcast. You just bring in guests, but you never talk to the guests. You just you just have a certain topic that you guys want to debate, and you just debate it in front of the guests the whole time and never ask them anything.
And every time they butt in to say something, just don't acknowledge it.
Yeah, that would be good. I would listen to it.
That's all right. I'm gonna write that down for a future venture. All right, Banko, bring us back on point while I write that down. I'm serious. I'm writing it down.
All right, fair enough. All right, Randall. So you get to concept. When did you recognize when you were at a good enough point in the business to go all in on that and leave the 7 to 3 job and sort of be full-time entrepreneur in the business?
I kind of just reversed engineered out of my monthly expenses to where I said to myself, okay, I've got about 6 months that I could live how I'm currently living, and then before running out of cash. And I thought to myself, if worse comes to worse, I could probably get back into a paint store and get another job. So yeah, I just turned it into a numbers game. And I also, as obvious as this sounds, I kind of had it like in a moment of an epiphany to where I said, am I not doing this full time because I'm not doing it full time? And kind of a confusing statement, but I essentially just said, what more could I be doing if I did have this as a full time, and what would that actually translate into sales or revenue or profits? And this, you go through kind of the same mental exercises when you start hiring employees as well. You kind of go, okay, if I fired myself from this particular role and hired somebody to handle that role, what would that actually mean for my efficiency? Would it save me time? Would it save me money? Would it make me money? And you kind of look at it through that lens. Yeah, that's kind of the mental exercise that I went through.
Building
and actual numbers exercise too.
Building on that thought process of hiring people and then what would I do with that time? I think just, I mean, not from personal experience, but listening to other business owners speak about, or business coaches, whatever, they talk about you should buy back your time, but a lot of people struggle with that because they're crunching numbers and they don't want to spend the money, but it's also like you're going to buy back time, but actually use that time to do something productive. How did you go through that mental process of like, all right, I'm going to hire this employee, they're going to take this on, this is what I'm going to do with this time that I'm freeing up? Like, how did that learning process go for you?
Very slow, because quite naturally, I'm a miser. I like saving money. I like being very methodical, and I like to measure the actual effectiveness of allocation of dollars. So it was a slow thing for me to really kind of understand. But I think once I kind of began to understand uh, something called HIME, it's a acronym for high impact, minimal effort, and I could look at the business through the lens of HIME activities. So if I could look at something and I said, okay, if my sole attention is on this for the next 60 days, and I optimize this to a certain level, and it starts either kicking out cash or it starts saving us cash, what's the actual upside of this? And as I started looking at things through that lens, whether it's like efficiency of machines or it's optimization of advertising in some capacity, when I started looking at it through that lens, I started understanding the impact of hiring people, what the impact of hiring people could be. I look back on it now, and I actually think that to run a successful e-commerce business, your OpEx has to be really, 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 really low. And I think that if I went back and I did it again, I would probably contract people out before I would employ people, and I would probably do it project basis versus like your employee that's always going to be working on this. So I would look at things that through the lens of Jaime. Um, I would understand what actually needs to get done, and then I would say, look, I'll pay you $25,000 to just get this done. You got 60 days to do it. Versus you're going to do this until you're no longer interested or you're not doing it right, so we have to fire you and we'll pay you $60,000 a year. Um, uh, that's the way that I would approach it now. I'd keep my OpEx low. I would do project basis stuff, and I would just contract people out to just get the project done.
I can relate to that wholeheartedly. I think just in the product development space, granted, we do a lot more on the software side than you guys were doing, I'm sure, with a tangible product to start. I mean, with ours, the service is super important with the application piece, the mobile app. So much of our work early on, it's kind of funny, like listening to you work through that thought where early on we were doing so much contract stuff that often we got worried that contractors didn't always see our vision because they weren't in house. So there, I just kind of wanted to throw that other piece out.
Mhm.
I'm not saying you are wrong by any means. I would say the only, like, just from living on the other side of that, of starting almost entirely with contract labor, was we were often working with people that then we needed to onboard vision wise. So we were spending so much time teaching them what the mission was, what we were chasing. And the work that we got back sometimes might not have been congruent with what we were chasing down.
I get it. I definitely get it. Um, early version of me, I'm right there with you. To where you would contract somebody out, and their heart wasn't in it, because they weren't dirty in the business with you. The dirtier somebody can get in the business with you, the more their heart gets into it. The more their heart gets into it, the more it's just you can just see it in their work that one, they give a shit, and two, they get what you're trying to do. Um, so you're absolutely right, Adam. That would be a downside of saying, okay, here's your job, do your job. Is they really wouldn't understand. They wouldn't be so woven into the business and really understand what you're trying to do. And I think there's something to be said that if you hire people, and the people that you hire on a daily basis see you wake up and just give everything that you got to a business, I think people see that, they appreciate that, they love that, and then it's contagious, and they actually want to do better for you. And anytime anybody does any sort of work that they actually want to do versus like they're forced to do, you're just going to get a better result. So um, I think we're at a crossroads of the luck non-luck thing again, where it's like there's upsides and downsides to both, and there's truths in both sides. And uh, Adam, if I launch something else, and I said I'm going to keep my OpEx low and pay on a per project basis, I would probably get into it and I'd go, no one gives a shit. I got to hire people. So it's it's there's no right answer, and but I completely agree with what you're saying, Adam, and I can relate to it. I understand what you're saying.
And that's not to say I'm not on board with what you're saying as well, because there's the complacency piece that comes with
Oh yeah.
sitting in one role. You completed the initial project or what you were so excited about. And then 18 months down the line, it's just like, all right, well, what do I do now? And you might not be the person that's best served for the task that's needed from the company. We also were operating, I mean, you and I operating small businesses where everybody involved has to wear multiple hats. no matter what their title says, every person is wearing a different hat at some point during the day, week, hour, year, anything. It's not like we're all in silos. So there's so many different pieces to that of how do you keep people engaged? How do you keep people excited? And a great way to do it is hiring people by project as opposed to full-time employees. So there's the give and the take. It's
Mhm.
pros and cons. It's just the beauty of doing business.
Yeah, and it's also when you have a smaller business and people are wearing multiple hats, how do you continue to manage people where there's not resentment that's curated? Because if everybody's job is kind of blurry and everybody kind of just does everybody else's job, so to speak, um, there is beautiful things about having lanes and staying in lanes. Uh, I know I'm one of those people that I hate whenever I'm working on something and somebody from a distance comes over and wants to have an opinion about the something that I've been like busting my ass on, and they have no context. I know I go, oh, come on, like you're not in this, like I'm in it. Um, but my point is that if somebody feels like they're working harder than the other person and their lanes are kind of similar and there's crossover, it creates resentment. It creates weird dynamics. So I think the can of worms that we're opening here is that it's that managing people or running an organization and the management and the leading of people is a tough one. But I think probably like the best or the easiest solution uh, to good management or good leadership is you just have to work extremely hard and you have to lead by example by working extremely hard. And I think everything else kind of falls into place. You have to get respect from people, and the only way you're going to get respect from people is if you actually show up and get your hands dirty.
One curious question from me, not ever managing people or owning a business. I know it's basically your first baby. I mean, Adam has mentioned it on previous podcasts, and getting into hiring contractors versus hiring full-time employees. Is there a back of the mind thought process there? Well, if I hire someone full-time, I can trust them more.
I don't know if it's trust more so than it is like um, you kind of feel like you're getting more. At least for me, I feel like I'm getting more like efficiency out of my dollars. It's kind of like if you just contract somebody out and you go, hey, do this project, there's a lot of mystery to what they're actually doing. And I guess if they just deliver the project, then oh well, who cares what they're doing. But whenever you have an employee, you feel like, okay, there's these certain cracks within the business that they could fill, or uh, I could use their time to help with this. It just feels like you're maybe getting more bang for your buck, so to speak, that whenever you have an employee versus a contractor. The contractor, the person that's just doing the project, they're just doing the project. With an employee, especially in a small business, if you kind of have a little bit of a leak in your bucket somewhere, you can kind of say, hey, why don't you keep an eye on this leak of the bucket while you're still doing your thing, because it seems like you've got a little bit more time. And it becomes even more of a complex equation whenever you're working from home as well, remote work. You don't actually know what somebody's doing, or you don't know how much time they actually have. Um, and that becomes a whole nother strange dynamic.
I started laughing because in my mind, when Banko asked the question, I was thinking of the Flex Seal. Let me slap this tape on this and fix the leak.
Yeah,
And then the fact that you said leaky bucket, I was just like, oh, this is so perfect. Thank you. Uh, but
it's
I,
pretty incredible product.
yeah. Speaking of that, we should get him on. But isn't he in prison or something? I don't want to be mixing up infomercial guys. So I
Well,
apologize if I'm.
Billy Mays died, I think, and I
I
think
think
he's
he died,
he's
and
like the
then
OG
is
guy.
it the My Pillow guys in prison?
Oh no,
So,
Mike Lindell's living the dream, I think.
The My
but
Pillow
the
guy
He
he came from jail before the pillow was invented, then invented it post
oh
he
that.
was
Yeah.
addicted to crack or something.
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, and then he sells like $80 million of pillows every year.
Okay. Yeah, my bad. Sorry for the slander that I'm tossing out in the podcast sphere. But what I was going to say, it feels like with a full-time employee or somebody that you hire to bring in, it almost feels like you're getting a utility man, even if that's not the title that they're going to have, versus contract labor. You are filling one specific need for a set amount of time. So
Mhm.
you might get greater return for that really specific amount of time, but the runway's short and then you're done with it. And you either need to figure out what's next on the list and constantly be uh, ready to jump to the next thing, versus the utility man. You feel like you have someone with you going through it and you can bounce ideas. I think there's comfort in that as opposed to contract labor. You can make it what you want. You can make somebody feel like they're a part of the team, but there's an end to that. When it's somebody that's hired on, generally you guys are going to have a congruent mission, uh, gunning for the top to the moon.
Cat needs to get let out the room now.
I don't know
Yeah.
what this scumbag is doing.
See you, Dewey.
He's in timeout in the corner.
Oh my god.
I want to bring it back though, Randall, as you're dealing with Dewey. To
Literally hurting cats.
yeah. Uh, you you mentioned remote work versus in office, and I guess you've had the perspective from both ends because I mean a
Yeah.
lot of it was pre-COVID versus post-COVID, where Adam, majority of your business has been post-COVID. Um, Randall, where was I don't even actually know this answer. Were you guys all in the same location from 2014 to 2020 pre-COVID?
Well, kind of, sort of. It started. Uh, well, at one point, I was leaning into somebody named Alan Gutcher, and he actually his son played at Tampa. I don't know if he was
Yeah,
there.
he played at Eckerd. We recruited him,
Oh,
and then he
Danny.
grad transferred. I was gonna say from Beacon Bats. That's the
Mhm.
Alan Gutcher you're speaking of.
Yeah.
Yeah, Danny, Eckerd College.
Mhm.
He has the unbelievable statistic personally that he might be the only person ever to play at all four. I mean, sorry, all three 4-year colleges around Tampa Bay in a collegiate career because he went USF, Eckerd, Tampa.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that is intriguing. Um, is there any other colleges around there?
They all shut down because there
Uh,
was Clearwater Christian and some of the
okay.
others. We'll bring Danny on at some point, I guess, to talk about his interesting college
Oh
baseball
no,
career.
that is intriguing though. Yeah, I guess I didn't really realize that he went to Eckerd, because I know that he went to Tampa and I knew he went to USF, but I didn't realize he had a stop in
Sick. Thanks, man.
Eckerd.
Really appreciate it. Thanks for erasing this from your memory.
Gives our signs away, doesn't realize players played for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Um, yeah, so at one point I was working with Alan, and there was a small amount of work coming uh, out of the Tampa area. But for the most part, yeah, it's been in the Polk County area, um, and the structure of our business, we had remote workers, mostly doing customer service and social media advertising, but a lot of it was done under one roof, and we were in the same location for about 5 or 6 years. Um, and when I left the business, it was still in the same location that we were at since like 2017, maybe. So we were there for 6 or 7 years, and split a bunch of people in-house, because obviously you can't do manufacturing remotely, but some things that can be done remotely, people were all over the country.
And how many employees did you have at the largest?
The largest, so we were on the fortunate side of COVID, well positioned. E-commerce exploded whenever COVID came around. Everybody was sitting around, stimulus money, buying things on their phones. And so the time between 2020 and 2021, we got up to about 60 employees.
Whoa.
Got up to about $15 million of revenue, and then exploded up, and then it came down. The cost to acquire customers online, just like, they got stupid easy, because everybody's attention was online. And then I don't know if you guys have ever seen the statistic of all of commerce, only 15% of commerce is online, which is kind of crazy if you think about the amount of shit that you guys probably buy online, or your girlfriends or wives buy online. That still only makes up 15% of people's actual purchasing. So when the world shuts down and you can't go and actually make a purchase anywhere other than online, it all kind of flows to online. And we were just well positioned, and we dumped fuel on the gas, or we dumped fuel on the fire, and yeah, it was a good couple of years there.
And what was your big kind of like breakout moment? I don't know if this is going back to Banko's quote unquote lucky moments or being lucky. Is Weren't you guys, didn't you get a deal with the MLB Players Association, or the rights to use their logos or something, which I'm sure was a massive break that enabled you to just sell to an entirely different group that you could actually brand?
Yeah, 2017 was the winter meetings was in Orlando, and we got a 10 by 10 booth there. At that time, we had a Major League Baseball Players Association license, so we could use like players' names and signatures and their likeness. And in that booth, we just, that was kind of the breakthrough moment for us. There just a ton of people there, ton of interest. And Adam, you know this, that if you go to certain trade shows and you kind of look in the hard goods space, or you just look in the space in general of just like, for a lack of a better way of putting it, just like tchotchkes, like what are you going to sell at your team stores, or what are you going to sell as souvenirs? It's all kind of like everybody kind of just copying each other, or cannibalizing each other in some capacity. And we just had something that was unique, and we had something that people were really interested in, and it created a nice buzz. And the person that controlled licensing for Major League Baseball was there, and then that started the conversation of us being able to use Major League Baseball marks. And so in 2018, just before Q4 of 2018, we signed an agreement with Major League Baseball. And if you just think about it, to sell something with Aaron Judge's name on it versus to sell something with the Yankees logo on it, it's a whole different ball game. And that definitely changed the face of the business.
I don't have anything on that, Adam, so you can
Oh,
keep building on
okay.
that if you need to. But
yeah, it's not cheap, but it's all relative, and that's one of the difficult parts of business, is making decisions, being able to look far enough out into the future and say, okay, if we make the decision to invest this money now, at the time for 2018, for just the license for 2018, the minimum that we had to pay Major League Baseball was $50,000. You say to yourself, if we have a Major League Baseball license in Q4 and we pay $50,000 for it, are we going to get that back in multiples? And that's the difficult part of business, is you have to always look at things in a lens of, am I making the right decision here? Are these dollars that I'm voting into the business right now, are they going to turn into are they going to turn into more dollars in the future? And that's the difficult thing. And it becomes really difficult when you have a moment like COVID where everything explodes, and then you have just unrealistic expectations of what reality is. And so then you go back to Major League Baseball and you say, hey, look, we're $15 million a year now, so our minimums can be X, because it's no big deal, because we're going to do $15 million in revenue. But then when everything comes back down to earth and you say, hey, Major League Baseball, actually, we're not a $15 million company, it becomes a weird dynamic, because you just promise the world, and then the reality is that business is a living, breathing thing. You're going to have great years, you're going to have okay years, you're going to have down years. But if you can zoom out and average out the accumulation of a bunch of years rather than year to year, you'll have a better job of being able to estimate what's on the horizon.
I don't know if this is getting too far ahead. Well, Banko,
I actually do have something
if you
now.
have something,
Yeah.
go. All right.
So, I mean, you mentioned going and talking revenue and how the business is doing with MLB. Is that how the contract with them is structured year to year, of like how much you pay for the rights, or like what does that matter in the process of like that conversation?
Yeah. So I think the last agreement that we were part of, I think it was a 2-year agreement, and then you uh, you make the agreement of a minimum guarantee. So that means that no matter how much Major League Baseball stuff you sell, no matter what, even if you sell 1 unit, you're still going to pay them a certain amount of money. Otherwise, you're paying them, for easy math, let's just say you're paying them 10% of whatever you sell that has a Major League Baseball logo on it. If you sold $15 million of Major League Baseball stuff, you would owe them 10% of that $15 million. But if you sold 1 unit, if you sold $50 of Major League Baseball stuff, you'd still owe them $400,000. Um, yeah, and then the terms, you can, the length of the license, you can negotiate that. The minimum, you can negotiate that. The percentage of what you're paying them, uh, tough to negotiate that. But yeah, I mean, I guess you could.
And other than the money piece and the negotiation part and make it sense from a business standpoint for yourself, is it otherwise hard to get those rights with the MLB? Like, is there other hurdles that they have for certain people to get that contract with them?
Yeah, when we were doing it, Major League Baseball, they they controlled the licensing. Um, since Major League Baseball controlled the licensing, they were really, really, really strict on who they were letting in. Um, then Fanatics bought the rights to the licensing, and then since Fanatics has purchased the rights to licensing, they've been less strict on who they actually let in. And I think they've lowered, before there was like a certain like minimum that you had to live within, and it was higher. Fanatics has kind of lowered that minimum, and they've kind of let more people in. And I think it's gotten, and I'm speaking out of speculation, not necessarily certainty or just observation. I've kind of observed that it's gotten a little bit easier to get a Major League Baseball license.
Because you paved the way, right? This is all because of you. You just changed the industry for the little guy.
Well, I think I think Fanatics looks at it as like, how many people can we get in here, versus Major League Baseball looked at it as more of a like prestigious kind of like,
Hmm.
we're not going to let people in. Um, so
Major League Baseball doing that? Are you kidding me? That's crazy.
well, right. It's yeah. It, I don't know. I think that it's just all strategy, you know. It's who do you want to be? And it seems like Fanatics wants to kind of go with higher quantity, and maybe Major League Baseball is more focused on quality of people.
Where I was going prior to Banko's questioning was the ultimate exit and how maybe difficult that was emotionally, as opposed to financially making decisions. I understand there's certain things that you can do that are right for the family, making the next move, but as Banko alluded to earlier, I'm sure Dugout Mugs was your child for the longest time. And having that moment where you're officially separating can't be easy. So I'd love if you could walk us through that or what was going on for you at that time.
Yeah. The last 18 months of the business, it operationally just got harder and harder and harder to work within. And then as that was happening, I had an actual son. You know, I had my first baby. I guess technically, if we're talking about, I had my second baby. Um, and kind of in the beginning of this podcast, we talked about it that it was 10 years ago, so I was 24 years old when I was around you guys. Um, and I had these big dreams, and you know, at 24, you pretty much, I was 34 years old. And for the first time in a really long time, I slowed down long enough to actually think about what was important. Um, Adam, you probably know this, but when you get to building something, you don't really think about much. You just kind of just put your head down and you just build, and you don't really look up. And having my son was the first time that I was forced to slow down. When you've got a crying baby in the middle of the night and you got to go rock them in the dark, and you can't stare at your phone, and you can't stare at your emails, and you can't stare at your statistics of social of advertising, and you can't look at all sorts of spreadsheets, and you can't look at your inventory, and you can't look at these things. The only thing you really have is yourself. And for me, it was just conversations with God. And I was just still operating from a 24-year-old's dreams to where I was really 34 and ready for something new. So oh yeah, I put my life into it. um, and and of course it's emotional to move on to something that you put your life into, but I just realized that I got what I needed to get out of it. And I was ready to move on.
Looking back at the last 10 years, is there any regrets?
Oh man, I don't think so. I don't well, I guess if I kind of took regrets and I put it more into and I rebranded it to what I wish I would have done more of. Well,
Marketing guy.
harder conversations. I wish I would have just ripped the Band-Aid off and had more harder conversations. You know, um, that might be. It's not a regret. It's just like one of the biggest learning things for me is that just have the hard conversation like immediately. You know, don't let it linger. Don't let it build up. Just immediately have the hard conversation. And I think I wish I would have had more hard conversations.
And I will open the door for this conversation to happen. You mentioned at the very beginning, the partnership and then the breakup and then the acquisition of the breakup company.
Mhm.
Uh, I'd love to. I've never actually heard the whole story. I don't know what you're willing to share, not to share, but I'm just curious to hear sort of that story.
Feel free to
Uh,
tell us that's an off the air thing if
Yeah, we can
or
always take
just
it
tell us
out.
to go screw ourselves, which also works.
what, like, how we bought it, or like what do you mean?
Well, I mean, you mentioned like you had the partnership originally, and
Uh-huh.
I don't know, when did you guys officially switch to, it was Lumberland and then it split into Lumberland and Dugout Mugs. When did
Uh-huh.
that actually happen? And like, if we can go down that rabbit hole and talk about that, awesome. If we can't, you can say that. But just intrigued.
Yeah, I don't Lumberland, we started Lumberland in March of 2016. No, hold on. Yeah. Yeah, March of 2016. I think we sold our first Lumberland mug. And my dates might be a little off because it's been a long time. But yeah, we started Lumberland March of 2016. I think maybe a month or two after selling that first mug, I think we went in opposite directions. And then yeah, I started Thompson Mug Company, and then eventually became Dugout Mugs within a few months. I want to say at the time we had 1,000 mugs. You know, Lumberland had 1,000 mugs that were ordered in. We agreed he would take 500 mugs. I would take 500 mugs. We would do our thing. And then probably 6 months after we agreed to that, I got I got a I got a nice little like certified mail, and I got sued saying that I wasn't allowed to sell the mugs, which that ended up doing a deposition. That's the deposition over my left shoulder here, or that's part of the deposition. And it says, okay, so as of September of the year 2015, the name Lumberland was in use. Is that right? And then my answer to the attorney for Lumberland was, I don't know how you define in use. All right, well, let me see if I can break it down just a little bit. The name was conceived of, correct? Sure, okay. Let's talk about that for a minute. Do you recall when the name was conceived of? Yes, okay. And when did that occur? And I said, I was taking a shit. And so, and that's true. I was taking a shit when I came up with the name Lumberland. And yeah, it was an odd thing. You know, I had the idea to turn the barrel of a baseball bat into a drinking mug. We worked together to come up with a prototype. We worked together to sell the very first mug. That very first mug got sold. We just had some fundamental differences. I didn't think it was like personal, but apparently it was personal. And I just said I didn't want to work together anymore. We went in our separate ways, just kind of quiet for 6 months, and then I just got sued. The lawsuit was as frivolous as it gets. Fast forward to 6 or 7 years, maybe 8 years later, we buy Lumberland. When we go to buy Lumberland, I fly up to Boston. It's the first time that I've interacted with the person, and I open up the door to just. The agreement is that the lawsuit would go away if we just stopped the business, if we stopped our business, which is a fucked up thing because I fucking came up with the idea. I brought it to market. It's like, why the fuck would I do that? And yeah, I bring it up to him. I open up the door for like, hey, it was my dream, it was my product, and you filed a frivolous lawsuit to try to get me to stop doing it. Cost $30,000 of my money. Anything you want to say about that? And he said, sometimes you make strategy calls in business that don't work out. So let that be a lesson to anybody that's in business, that ethics matter, morals matter. And yeah, that's the story. That's the very short story of a very long story.
Yeah, no, I
I
mean,
like the taking the shit part.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, yeah, what a moment that was, huh? And that's why it just continues to live right there. And I'll leave you with this story. I was playing baseball at Florida Tech, Barry University. Pavo, I think, ended up going there, didn't he, at one point? But either way,
Yes.
at Barry, we're getting the shit kicked out of us. Uh, a kid gets hit, a pitch gets thrown. It's like 16-8. This kid gets hit and he's all pissed and he's like, "Hey, what the hell?" And obviously we didn't do it on purpose. And our bench is like screaming, like, "Hey, just get the fucking first base." And then the coach came sprinting out of Barry's dugout and he goes, "Time, I want to check on my player. I want to check on my player." And he runs up to the player and he gets in his face and he goes, "Don't you dare fucking wake them up. Don't you fucking dare wake them up." Meaning that if you wake us up, you're already kicking the shit out of us. Just keep kicking the shit out of us. Don't wake us up. Unfortunately for AJ, when he decided to sue me, he fucking woke me up. And we kicked his ass. We bought him. So um, yeah, if you're beating somebody, or if you're just fucking keep going beating them. You don't need to wake them up. So that's what happened. It's a blessing, Created my own competition, and it got me out of bed every morning. So it's a blessing.
That is a good way to part ways. I appreciate you getting into that. I appreciate the vulnerability.
Yeah, thanks for asking, guys.
I don't have any other questions. That was honestly like one of the biggest questions I had.
Of course it
But
was.
Randall, I mean, I appreciate you taking the time. I mean, kind of out of the blue where I reached out to you and you responded very quickly, and I appreciate everything you've done for us, and jumping on the show and telling your story.
Yep, let's do it. Let's do it again. Maybe just have me on for another one, and you guys just debate, and I'll just sit here. I can be that uh that guinea pig. See how
The pilot episode of that one.
the format, how that works.
Perfect. I love that, and I'm just happy we were able to reconnect as well. I really did enjoy our time together. That one semester you were our coach, I felt like you brought a level-headedness to a field that I had been chasing for a long time. So I appreciate that. I know our time together was short on the baseball field, but I'm glad we were able to reconnect here.
Yeah.
And what you've done for us and joining us here does mean a lot.
Yeah. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for making this old man feel good about himself.
No
I
problem.
I wouldn't call 34 old because I'm close to that, and I don't want to think that that's old.
Well, I tell my wife when 34 is close to 40, 40 is close to death. So, let's get to work, guys.
It's great. Love that. Super motivational stuff to leave.
How do you
Let's go
go ahead
kill
and
it
close
today.
this out?
Work. But thank you, Randall.
Yeah.
This is kind of, we don't have a really fancy outro or anything like that. I usually just tell people to listen to Banko's outro where he tells people to get in touch with us. So for anyone that wants to come on and have this kind of conversation with us, listen to the outro, reach out to us. Randall, thanks a ton. Hope everyone out there enjoyed it.
See you guys.
Hi everyone, Grant here. Thanks for tuning into the show. If you could like, share, and subscribe, we'd greatly appreciate it. Also, if you think you or someone you know has a good life story to tell, we are always open to guest suggestions. You can send those suggestions to our email, tworkpod@gmail.com. Thanks again for the support.